Order. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Okay, being none. Now I have items 4.4 and 4.6. Paul, are there any other items?
Move the balance.
Move the balance. All in favor? Okay, that carries. So, Sean, why don't you go item 4.4?
Me?
Yes.
I just, paragraph 2 of the recommendations appears to be more writing a blank check. I'm just wondering why is it required and why it's not, doesn't just come back to council if further approval is necessary. And also there's no cost estimate at all, which is why I made the reference to a blank check. I'm not comfortable just waiving it or suspending it for the not knowing where it's going to end.
We have in the past asked and received this permission where, under this circumstance, we are very unsure of the costs that are going to be incurred. We tried to put an estimate together. It was very difficult. We weren't sure of what support we would need through our discussions with the region. So what we thought we would do is ask for this permission, and we do plan to report back in March with funds that have been expended, and at that time we'd have a better idea of where we're going with respect to this matter. I can tell you between now and March, the funds that would be expended would be merely to support us in our discussions with the region, and should the region release any further documentation studies with respect to the EA. And just to give council maybe a little bit of context, back in June 18th, we were awarded $55,000 for the peer review of the EA. Those monies have been expended. So we have no funds left, and we're into this, and we need some support to see this through at least to March. We just don't know how much, but I can tell you it's not going to be tons of money. We will have some expenditures for at least one consultant. That's econometrics with respect to the water quality issues.
And well, even a ballpark, I'm really not comfortable just saying waiving it all together, even if we just say an offset limit of $100,000 or something, as long as there's some sort of ceiling. And I'd like reporting back.
Yeah, that's more than enough. I'd be very happy with that.
Before, well, it's just a number. But I'd also like to report back before March if there are expenditures, if there are drawdowns on it, so we can see where we are.
If we could have it at March, I'd appreciate it. We're just pushing into the Christmas season. There's a report, as you know, going back to the region late January, early February. So that just provides us, the proper time to do a proper report, get estimates, and come back with more details.
But you can assure that it's not we're not going to get a $250,000 bill at the end. We're going to be under $100,000.
Yes.
Right. All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, no,
Sorry.
I'll just comment that I think it's, from what I've seen to date, it's money well spent as far as this consultant and the work they've done, the issues identified, and as well, the presentation done at the region, and I think that we need to continue on with using someone who has a great deal of expertise in the water quality issues. So I would support it, and I'll move it.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, is that with the upset limit?
No upset limit.
No.
Okay.
So I understood. Just we know.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's fine. No, I agree with it.
Okay, all in favor? Item 4.6.
That's me again. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, I'm not sure if this is Mr. Meredith or this.
It's myself and Ms. Haas.
Okay. I thought the last time we dealt with this was to the remediation on this property, and it was going to be at a saleable state now. That was my recollection. That's not what I'm reading from the report.
Through the chair, it is still in the saleable state. It's just the amount that it has been appraised for assumed a clean site. So while the testing did come back that it is clean, they cannot determine the exact source of some of the smell to it or the methane. There is no direct source of a methane, any kind of exhaust, methane exhaust to it. So what they've recommended is that we disclose all of our reports to any future development, and then through their soil testing, we would determine how much, not even remediation, but how much work would be involved in siting and development based on their needs.
Well, we spent a fair amount of money on remediation action, and as of the July 5th numbers, it's 0 across the board for everything, which looks like it's clear. Are we required by law to disclose this? Because we're just automatically lowering our price at that point. Are we required to disclose this? Like, we remediated the property, all the numbers are 0.
I think that's the recommendation we've received, due diligence on behalf of the town, that in the sale we should disclose this, as minor as it is, that just to be safe harmless to the town of any future claim, possible future claims.
That's a recommendation. That's a report we received, okay. All right, thank you. I guess it's done now. We're not going to see anything else back on this, because this has been before us many times in the last few years.
That's correct, and we are currently working with someone on the property. We keep our fingers crossed we have some good news on this in the future.
All right, I'll move it, thank you.
Okay, so all in favor? That carries. So 5.1, we have a presentation, Strong Neighborhood Strategy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Both Ms. Vaughn and I are very pleased to bring to you the phase 1 of the Strong Neighborhood Strong Neighborhood Strategy report today. This was a joint initiative with Recreation and Culture, the Office of the CEO, this past year. As you know, we temporarily delayed the project, waiting for the most recent release of census data. And so now that we have the key components that we needed, we've updated the report and are ready to proceed with bringing phase 1 to you. And then we're very excited to be looking forward to phase 2 of this report. We've also had the wonderful pleasure of working with Tucker Reed and Associates on this initiative as our consultant, and I know most of you are quite familiar with Claire. She's going to be giving the presentation today, so I'm going to turn it over to Claire now, and she can walk through the presentation, and then we'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mary Lou. Through you, Mr. Chair, we're essentially here today to talk about where we've been, our next steps, and when we'll be back to you with the final report. And I won't go through the presentation overview, but that essentially captures what the presentation is about. And as you know, the project background received direction from both the diversity and community engagement strategy as well as the safety plan. And both strategies directed council to consider building neighborhood strategy, strengthening neighborhoods to address very local issues. Process to date, as you know, we have a staff-driven steering committee at this point. We've reviewed all of the background information, demographics, had a community survey, looked at promising practices. We've interviewed most of you in terms of key opinion leaders and what you feel should be addressed within the strategy. We've had focus groups, an online survey that was well responded to. We worked with other government agencies. We had a mapping workshop, and we heard from other government agencies, social services, health, police, and education as to what they were doing in specific neighborhoods and any issues they could bring to light. Our view is to work better together, and when we report our findings, have another workshop with those agencies and see if we can't develop some stronger partnerships. We've also drafted neighborhood boundaries, which we're here to share with you, and I'm sure you've seen within the report. So our definition of neighborhood, district within a community where residents live within proximity to each other and relate to common yet distinctive historical, physical, social characteristics. So in essence, they're in the same location, they have much in common, although with a significant portion of the community working outside of the community, that often presents its challenges. Our vision is to ensure that Ajax has a high level of community pride, and not that it doesn't already, and much of the statistics bear that out. But pride and cohesion built through efforts to make neighborhoods safe, connected, and engaged. And especially through the DAYS plan, our findings were that because there were varying backgrounds in neighborhoods, it was often difficult to reach out to neighbors, become friends, and really support any local issues. Our draft guiding principles have been developed, and of course we're going to test these once again in the focus groups when we meet in the neighborhoods. But neighborhoods clearly have differing needs, and we know that they're borne out by the demographic information on each. And in essence, building strong neighborhoods is all about building capacities so that neighborhoods can be self-governing, address issues on their own, work together. Our hope is that for the full community of Ajax, they'll have one vision and hopefully a framework of how agencies and communities, neighborhoods can work better together. We know through our research that having community hubs, either libraries, community centers, local meeting place, are critical to building strong neighborhoods so people have a place, a safe place to go, be very welcome there, and have spaces to start developing any strategies or simply having social opportunities. And we hope to build in better communications and recognition as part of our approach. Demographics, I know that you're quite aware of these demographics, so I won't go in much detail, but we've had a significant population increase. We are one of the fastest growing municipalities. There's many new neighborhoods, and you have greater growth to come. We have a higher percentage in Ajax of families and children, and often need particular focus. Lower percentage of seniors than most. However, the seniors population will be growing significantly over the next decade, and a high percentage of residents that move, and either in or out or within, and that is consistent with the last census data. I think it's out a percentage point, so there continues to be that need to support new residents. Diverse populations, as you know, continue to settle here, and as we know, different neighborhoods will have different needs, and that is why we need to get into the communities and have those focus groups. So our key messages to date, we're doing well in Ajax, and the respondents to the surveys and our focus groups spoke very highly of how Ajax has the ability to be nimble, understand community issues, work collectively with other agencies to address them, and I think residents are very grateful for you being on trend and willing to jump in to assist. And the survey also bore out that the town has a role, and residents see the town playing a leadership, a coordination, a facilitation role in ensuring that we do have strong neighborhoods. But we have a good response to the survey already. 72% of neighborhoods or residents know their neighbors by name. That's a great start. There's trust within the community. People feel welcome, and people feel that local assets have great value, and it's nice to see that parks and community centers are well up there. We felt, and through our focus groups and key opinion leader interviews as well as a survey, that we wanted to ensure that certain neighborhoods receive focus first, and we feel that these elements or characteristics of the neighborhoods should be considered. Doesn't mean they have to have all of these characteristics, but we should see some predominance of young families, older adults, newcomers, lower income levels, as well as lower levels of education, and single parent families. So our ultimate goal is to ensure that there's self-initiation. So to be able to build capacity within the neighborhoods so that residents feel that there's a place to go to, there's someone to talk to about issues, and that the town will assist in connecting them with the right agencies or partners or play a role in facilitating that. The value of the catchment areas, so we're going to go through this, and I know that you have seen it as part of your report, but we looked at neighborhood catchments, and they were based on some criteria which I'll go through in a minute. But the catchment areas provide a local sense of identity, and although through the survey there was a strong percentage of residents that really identified with Ajax as a whole, but also there's a strong percentage that identify with their specific neighborhood. So we wanted to ensure that we identified the catchments, that they provide meaningful context for more discussion, and that doesn't mean that neighborhoods will have boundaries around them by any stretch. They're very fluid. It's just a primary sense of identity with the location. And we would like to have target communications and marketing and better understanding of the interventions, not only by the town, but other agencies as well. The proposed neighborhood catchments, and I know there is a map that you've seen within your report, but we developed them by considering primary boundary guidelines that included natural features, physical boundaries, railroads, railways, major arterials, development names, areas with planning significance, historically significant areas, and then primary intensification areas. As you know, this is a draft report, and we consider these catchment areas preliminary. We want to get into the neighborhoods and see where they may change as a result of those further discussions within the neighborhoods, and you'll see that the population numbers are not similar in any stretch. We go as low as 45 and high, I think 65 residents, and higher, more than 10,000 plus. So you'll see that these may change as a result of those further discussions. Preliminary neighborhood names, and I know you've had a chance to review these. There's a map in the report. And again, we're open for your further comments on these catchment areas. So the town's role. 87% of the population that responded to the survey felt that the town has a strong role in strengthening neighborhoods and identifying priorities within the neighborhoods. They saw the role as building capacity, so meeting with groups, assisting them in forming, assisting them in connecting to other agencies. It's not that the town has to do all the work by any stretch. It's empowering neighborhoods to do the bulk of the work, but there will be an investment of time that's required absolutely up front. Promising practices, I won't go through these, but we've seen Toronto, London, Guelph has completed strengthening neighborhood strategies, and we've seen some great promising practices. We have a few of our own to add to the list, and we've seen that there's very strong initiation to get back to grassroots building of capacity and working with neighborhood groups to ensure that people are feeling included, welcome, and have a role within their local neighborhood. Our best advice, and much of this came from our key opinion leader interviews with you folks, you've asked us to keep the plan simple and action-oriented, develop pilots, capitalize on what's working well now, and there's a lot that's working well now in Ajax. Key was not to stigmatize neighborhoods, and we've seen this done in Toronto, frankly, where there are priority neighborhoods, and some feel that there's a stigma attached because they've been identified around low income, low levels of education, and single parent families. So we will stay away from that. I thought a good piece of advice was to recognize that not all neighbors want to be engaged. And so we don't need to set our bar so high, but we will set a bar. And again, the role that community hubs will play in strengthening neighborhoods, that will play a large role. So our next steps, we will beginning in January and February our consultations. We have 8 we think we're going to set up. We'd like to work with the respective council members to assist us in terms of meaningful locations and combinations of neighborhood catchment areas. We'll be developing an action plan, getting back to the public to review the draft plan and make sure that we've captured their thinking. And we believe we'll be back here in June to present the final report. Are there any questions?
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Jordan?
Yes, page 77, if I can get back to it. I know there was some terminology there that I wasn't familiar with. 77. Yeah, the consumer segmentation exercise incorporating psycho. Would you mind explaining what you mean by that?
Identifies all the psychos in the neighborhood.
Oh, that's what I
So,
thought.
yes, and Tracy and I are happy to answer that question. This is it's actually through a company called Environics Analytics, which is a sister company to the Environics polling company that we use. They do a very unique process whereby they actually use a segmentation process. They've divided the country up into 66 unique neighborhood lifestyle choices. And it looks very specifically at psychographics, so that it actually incorporates the insights of behavior, the mindsets of consumers and of the residents. So aside from the demographic information, we actually have a really good picture of where they shop, what they eat, where they like to spend their money, how they like to be communicated with, and so forth. Interestingly enough, we've had several conversations with the Environics Analytics staff. We find great value in adding that component. It's a very unique project and initiative. We'd like to pilot it with this project because of its unique strength to this project specifically, but just being able to use that demographic and psychological information in combination to really understand who's living in that community when we go out to speak with them. So we are proposing that we introduce it. And Tracy, I'm not sure if you want to add to that just in terms of some of the benefits that we see coming out of it. Certainly the Office of the CAO and definitely Recreation are planning to use it for a number of different types of initiatives during the 1-year contract. So it would be a 1-year contract tied to this project, but we also have the ability to use it for some of our other needs as well.
Through the
Okay,
chair,
go ahead.
just to add to what Mary Lou was saying, basically really giving us, for the strong neighborhood strategy piece, giving us a really good understanding of how to resonate with those neighbors. So what are the primary values of the neighborhoods, of the neighbors that are living there? How do we communicate our messages? What formats work best to really engage them in a strategy like this, to get really good, useful information, to find out what it is they're looking for, what drives them, what motivates them, and how can we respond appropriately in different neighborhoods as a town. And then the next piece in terms of the overall picture, given the declining reliability of census data because of some of the changes, really giving us an ability in town to understand our residents from a number of perspectives. So certainly from a recreation and culture perspective, what's meaningful? What type of activities do they like to participate in? What are their physical activity rates? Again, what is meaningful for them for children's activities? So giving us some really good solid data sets to make informed decisions around program planning and service delivery. So for those two reasons, we think it's an incredibly vital source of information.
Just the psychographics information, does that come from the demographic data or is it an actual polling that's done?
I can answer that one. They have 22 survey machines that they are partners with, and for each postal code, they can give you 15,000 pieces of information. It's astounding.
No secrets.
No, well, it's interesting because during the run-up to the American election, they were talking about polling and things where they could actually determine how someone was going to vote before they voted and before that person actually even had probably thought about it. So is that the kind of thing where?
To some degree, I guess. It was interesting because both Mr. Dayton and I were actually in one of the very first reviews with them. And we each gave our postal code, and we both live in very different neighborhoods. And they described myself and my neighbors to a T. And they did the same thing for Mr. Dayton as well. It was incredibly accurate. Where I like to eat, what I like to do, where I shop. It was incredible.
That's, I mean, it is. It is, I'm glad I asked for the explanation. It is
Don't, when the store asks you what your area code is, don't tell
Well,
them.
no, it's
Hopefully.
interesting. I guess my other, that I can't quite get my head around, is this whole concept of neighborhoods, because I think a lot of people now are connected, and what was our old sort of definition or thought of a neighborhood isn't the same. They're connected through their work or social networks or their hobbies. I mean, I can give an example that when my kids were young, my network was the ringette and hockey teams. That's not the case now, obviously. So how do we get around that kind of network and sort of link the two? It doesn't really mean where I live, or does it? Does it?
Well, I think people will relate to their hockey groups and I think that will continue to happen. But people do have a desire to actually know the people that live on their street. It might be broader than that. And certainly we've seen that over the last couple of years with the number of neighborhood watches that are popping up. There's a real desire and a hunger in Ajax, and particularly North Ajax, for that connection with people that live within their school hub, within their street. And we're starting to see that more and more. So I think there's certainly a desire to really get back to knowing their neighbors, having some connections, having ball hockey, road hockey games on the street, and that connection with your neighbor. And they still will have connections with their outside interests. It could be faith-based or it could be sports-based. They will still have those as well, but they also want to be able to know Bob and Sue down the street and be able to have a friendly conversation when they're walking their dog or they're out with their children.
Well, if they all know they like the same restaurant and entertainment and everything, there's a lot of topics they have.
That's right.
in common.
That's right.
Based on their postal codes.
Tracy, did you want to add to that?
Please, thank you. Again, one of the other values, so talking from the embryonics information, we get the values that drive individuals as well. So we can look at issues and trends that are occurring and where we can map out residents that have particular attachment to certain types of values. So whether it's community safety or other issues, we have an idea of how to connect with them. It also gives us indications of how they like to receive information. What is their network? What sort of social media do they use? So it gives us some really good ideas of tools and interventions, again, and how they identify, what groups do they belong to. So it gives us other pathways into really connecting with those residents that we might be missing if we don't utilize tools such as this in the next phase.
And if I might just take it further, that when we have all this information, we're going to use it for our programming, filling gaps, etc. Maybe if you could just elaborate, because I think it's important. I mean, it's interesting to get all the information, but I think we need to know that there's value in that.
It's also one tool for you, Mr. Chair. It's one tool of many that we'll use, the focus groups, the surveys, what we know about participation from the data from the Recreation and Culture Department. So those sorts of things will all be inputs, and then we'll work with the neighborhood group to determine the issues, what they'd like to address, and how they'd like to go about it.
In addition to that, Mr. Chair, we've had conversations with other municipalities that are actually using this information. So the City of Kingston, Mississauga, Oshawa has just joined on, Brampton, Kitchener, there are a number of municipalities have been using this tool to help them. City of Kingston is using it specifically in their Arts and Cultural Department to reach out to and do the marketing and program information. So they are actually targeting and only sending information to the neighborhoods that they know have an interest in arts and culture. So they're starting to target their communication outreach specifically related to those that have an interest. Fire services in the city of Brampton are starting to use it. They've actually identified neighborhoods where there are an increased number of fires or where there are fires, and they've looked at the lifestyles, and they've now started to channel their education and awareness programs specifically in those targeted neighborhoods.
So those are the examples of the municipalities that you've had an opportunity to talk to, and I guess their experience has been it's beneficial, and is there a way of measuring how effective this thing is?
Well, they certainly have found it to be an extremely beneficial exercise. They have been, they're continuing to, they're continuing the contracts. So they're not just one-year contracts, they're actually entering into long-term contracts because they have found it to be quite beneficial. Some are new, just like we are, where we're just exploring. And part of it is the resources to be able to drive this. It's a program that we tap into, so we actually have to dedicate the resources to be able to pull the data off that we need in order to move forward. So there's definitely a resource issue. And so obviously Ms. Vaughn and I have had some conversations about making sure that we are able to support that this year, and then we'll evaluate that as we go forward. And obviously if we feel that it has had really extreme benefits for us, then we will be back before council to talk about next steps, if there is any.
Councilor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't for the life of me find it in here, but there was a comment around lower income, and the association with that was lower education. So I'm wondering, what is that? Are you referring to the education their children are receiving, or that the household as a whole has a lower education, in that they don't have secondary education or they don't have post-secondary? And is that really a fair assessment?
Typically, neighborhoods that require a bit more focus and attention have either one or a combination of lower income, lower education rates, and single-parent families. And consistently in statistical data, lower or single-parent families led by females are even lower income than single-parent families led by males. So in most of the strong neighborhood strategies, they're looking at that as one component of a neighborhood that may require more intervention or more focus.
But not necessarily that a single mom raising a family doesn't have an education. Simply
No,
they don't
not
have the
necessarily.
income
No.
to support a family in a home, right?
Yes.
So that's what I don't like, that kind of association, because I don't believe it's true. I think that there may be some fact in that, but I don't like the fact that there's an association with, because you live in a poorer area, you don't have the education that other people
Yeah,
have.
and
Because to be honest with you, people who live in richer homes probably, or may, have less education and just have fallen into fate where they've been able to move through the system. So I don't like that comparison, and I don't like that stigmatism because of situations people find themselves in. There's reasons why they live there, and that's not always because they haven't had the education. So I don't like that association. I've made myself clear.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think that we're trying by any stretch to stigmatize neighborhoods. Often those characteristics are commonly found in neighborhoods where additional interventions or focus may be required. But you'll notice the list also included high areas where there are high incidence of newcomers or older adults or young families. So we may be providing more focus in different neighborhoods for different reasons. Thus, we're absolutely staying away from stigmatism.
Okay, Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Your neighborhood evaluation factors, Ajax's averages, you have 10% over 65, item 5, but item 6 is age over 65, below LICO. What is that?
Lower income cutoff, through you, Mr. Chair. Can
So we have a 15% over 65, but a third of that is lower. What is that?
It's called lower income cutoff. It's a measure that the government uses.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And interesting, we know that a huge percentage of work outside of Ajax, but now we have it documented, 81% have to go outside of Ajax for a living. Wow. We've been trying to cut that down, but we've been fighting the developers on that one. But anyway, thank you.
Councillor Jordan.
Just I pick up on Councillor Crawford's comments. I agree with that, and I think it should be lumped in. It should be category there, but not lumped in with low education. So on, and I like the term lone parent family. I think that it has a different connotation. So when we're doing this, I would like to see that in a separate category as well.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to this next question, but I was a little disappointed with the 269 residents that completed the survey. We're a municipality of plus 100,000, and I don't know what we could do to kind of get that representation up a little further, so that at least we could confidently say that it is the information we're getting from these 269. It is really indicative of what's out there and what people are feeling. So I don't have the answer as to how to get that number up, but if there's a way to increase that participation level. And I think just to finish, I think part of that has to do with the fact that we are a 905 municipality. There's never a really good time to bother people. We're busy, but I think we need to find a way to tap into that population and get those numbers up.
So, through the chair, that initial, it was a preliminary survey. It was just a quick survey that we sent out. The intent would be to do a survey as part of phase 2 and be far more comprehensive in our reach out, and hopefully that number will come up.
Okay.
But that was just a preliminary information survey that we sent out initially at the onset of the process. So
okay.
Our efforts will be far greater in phase 2, and that was the intent.
Okay, so you'll enlist other measures in
Absolutely.
terms of getting that number up.
Yep.
On page 5, your community neighborhood consultation process, you made reference to some community or neighborhood leaders. Just my experience with the whole Neighborhood Watch program, the residents that have come forward to whether to participate or be block captains or what have you, they are already leaders in the community, and we should probably tap into them. Like, they're there already.
Absolutely.
And I think they care about their community, and they have a willingness to participate and engage in the town's activities. Also on that page, the neighborhoods or that you've identified, I find them very large. And just looking at the north, Westney Heights, Applecroft, we're looking at in excess of 18,000 residents. And then next with Nottingham, Meadow Ridge, we have 15,000, and then Audley, Salem, we have another 15,000. I don't know, and I think Councilor Jordan alluded to this earlier, but those are large communities, and I don't know whether we could break them down further, because if you ask a resident, they might say where they live or their neighbor. They might say, the name of the developer's community, like it might be Imagination or Westney Heights, but these are very large areas. So I just had a little concern about how we're gonna relate here.
So the neighborhoods that we have here, there are actually two sets of, those are two neighborhoods within one. The intent would be to try to do the consultation in 8 meetings. Now, we could increase that to lower the size, but we would be a long time out in the community doing a lot of consultation. So we were trying to gather as much input as we could. The format of the consultation meetings will be that we will divide up. Once we get into that room with those neighbors, we will divide those 2 or 3 catchment areas up in the room and have some very specific conversations with them. But what we were trying to do is make sure that we weren't having to hold 22, we have 22 catchment areas. We weren't actually hosting 22 catchments meetings, because we, again, would need to extend that extensively into the spring to be able to talk to everybody. But by having 8 meetings, we invite everybody to come to those appropriate meetings, and then we break off into conversations, and we have some dedicated conversations with residents within those catchment areas in that one meeting.
Okay, and just finally, the consumer segmentation tool. When you send that information out, so in South Ajax, for instance, their mode of communication, maybe through this process, might be a community meeting, right? But if you apply this to a community in the north, they might want to do something online or something quick. I don't know what the answer is. Would this tool be able to help you identify what is the most effective way to engage these residents?
Yeah, it certainly will. And I think even just to reach out in terms of our promotional outreach, our communication strategy, it will help to identify those communities and how to reach out to them. I still think we're still going to need to move forward with the 8 meetings and still come together in one room to have that discussion and dialogue. But in terms of our communication strategy, we may find that some type of electronic communication tool will help to reach them better in the onset. So it will certainly help to inform that.
Okay, and then that's finally, I know we talked about this at our council retreat. That's in terms of branding this. I think people get quite intimidated when we use large words to describe these types of consultation. So whether we could make it so that it's friendlier, and it's inclusive, and it's welcoming, and that it's okay to show up and disagree, but just to kind of take the formality out of it so that it doesn't seem like it's government, and you know, people get a little uptight about stuff like that. Okay. That's all for me. Any other question? Move. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, item 5.2, the annual accessibility report and multi-year accessibility and action plan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm extremely excited to be here this afternoon to present information relative to the first ever Ajax Accessibility and Action Plan. And I know you've heard me here before talking about accessibility plans, but this one's a little bit different. Over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to be providing an overview of the plan itself and some changes that it's undertaken. We'll go over the development process, the foundation behind the plan, and I'll also provide a review of recent achievements and some initiatives that we can expect as we move forward. The Ajax Accessibility and Action Plan documents the town's process for preventing, identifying, and removing barriers. It demonstrates our current achievements and establishes an implementation framework for our future goals and priorities as an organization. It is important to note that the Accessibility and Action Plan is a living and progressive document. It's going to grow over time as our initiatives are completed and new projects are identified and added. Currently, the content is going to focus on implementing the requirements of the provincial integrated accessibility standards. This plan marks a shift from our annual planning, so our previous annual accessibility plan, to more of a 5-year forecast. And this is going to allow the opportunity to identify future timelines that are going to ensure that our accessibility consideration is ingrained within the organizational planning process. The process of accessibility planning is one that is never complete. Staff, council, the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and the community at large are engaged in accessibility planning and discussions year-round. Objectives within the plan are both long and short-term, which means that some items may be ongoing actions or require more long-term implementation over several years. It is my role as the accessibility coordinator to monitor the progress of the initiatives within the plan and to consolidate efforts across the organization to be included within the plan in consultation with our staff, our stakeholders, and the AAC, the Accessibility Advisory Committee. This assists with the overall multi-year forecasting, and the Accessibility and Action Planning Strategy has been developed to assist with this. So this image up here is a planning strategy visual map of essentially the content of our multi-year Accessibility and Action Plan. It goes over the foundation, our structures, our targets, and our objectives, essentially that visual cue of how the plan is going to lay out. I know many of you around the table are familiar with our guiding legislation, but just in brief review, the development of the Ajax Accessibility and Action Plan is supported by two different pieces of legislation. First, we have the Ontarians with Disabilities Act and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. The ODA requires that the public sector organizations such as municipalities incorporate accessibility planning into our day-to-day operations, and that we document such initiatives within a document known as an accessibility plan. It also requires that we establish an accessibility advisory committee. The AODA, on the other hand, takes this a little bit further. They are establishing accessibility standards in 5 core areas, including customer service, information and communications, employment, transportation, and the built environment. It's in place primarily for the purpose of ensuring that persons with disabilities are not discriminated against, and it's working towards achieving a fully accessible Ontario by the year 2025. So this image up on the screen illustrates the specific implementation requirements through the integrated standard, and they cover the areas of information and communications, employment, and transportation. Currently, the town is compliant with the customer service legislation, and the built environment standards are still in draft form. The content of the plan is organized under objective headings that parallel directly to the components of the legislation. Policy and procedure relates to the identification of accessibility barriers and implementation of solutions to prevent and remove them throughout the organization. Customer service speaks to the provision of accessible, quality customer service in response to the diverse needs of the town of Ajax. Information and communications identifies efforts to provide the town of Ajax communications and publications in accessible and alternative formats. The employment section documents initiatives relative to full participation of persons with disabilities in the town of Ajax in terms of employment. Transportation ensures efforts related to participation in accessible regional and provincial transit planning, and that municipal accessible taxi cabs meet the needs of persons with disabilities within our municipality. The built environment section relates to priorities and achievements for greater accessibility into, within, out of, and around Town of Ajax facilities, parks, trails, and public spaces. We'll talk a little bit of the foundation behind the plan's development. Inclusion and engagement of persons with disabilities is a long-standing corporate vision that's been integrated within the town's first accessibility plan, which was developed in 2003. In order to support progression and meaningful implementation of the Ajax Accessibility and Action Strategy, a strong foundation built from the following principles is necessary. We need informed and committed leadership. So we already are demonstrating this as Council has identified accessibility as a corporate priority through our Community Action Plan. All of our Town of Ajax departments provide input to the plan. Accountability is demonstrated through the availability of the plan and related documentation made publicly available and in alternate formats upon request. There's also accessibility training opportunities for our organization's full, part-time, and seasonal staff, as well as volunteers. We're also looking to develop an accessibility ambassadors program, an internal team led by myself, which will be responsible for delivering clear accessibility-related communications across the organization. And we're confident that by meeting or exceeding timelines of the legislation's implementation, the Town of Ajax can be looked to as a leader in accessibility. In alignment and coordination, in order for the multi-year plan to be successful with implementation objectives, it is necessary for it to be aligned with several other Town of Ajax guiding documents, policies, and processes. These include documents such as the Diversity and Community Engagement Plan and our strategic plan, our Community and Action Plan. Through the progressive implementation of this plan and compliance with the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, additional policy and procedure documents will be developed as our implementation progresses. Currently, the Town of Ajax and Ajax Public Library have in place multiple accessibility-related policy and procedure documents. And lastly, under the foundation, evaluation and reporting. Listening to feedback is an integral part of our accessibility evaluation process. The Town of Ajax is committed to continuing to review and expand on the consultation strategies we currently engage with our key groups, which include persons with disabilities, our AAC, and the community at large, in order to ensure that we're providing accessibility-related feedback opportunities. Additional evaluation and reporting efforts include initiatives such as annual review of the multi-year plan, preparation of an annual progress report to be presented to Council, which identifies how far we've come and any new initiatives that have been identified. We also require compliance reports to be submitted to the Accessibility Directorate of Ontario on behalf of the organization, and they're the body that regulates compliance for all of the Ontario organizations. All of these materials are also made public on the Town of Ajax website and are available in alternative formats upon request. So now we'll move into review of some of our recent initiatives over the past year and a half. And again, they represent just a highlight of our recent achievements. There's a more comprehensive list that's been included within the staff report in your agenda package. In the area of customer service, we see a continuation of accessible customer service training. This year alone, approximately 250 staff were either trained for the first time or received refresher training. Considerations for accessibility in corporate planning is also something we've adhered to. Several staff have participated in process mapping workshops in order to review and develop corporate policies moving forward using a customer service and diversity lens, accessibility being one of the integral components of diversity. Consultation with the AAC during development of the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan is also underway. We also see strong partnerships with several community organizations, such as Variety Village, Grandview Children's Center, and the CNIB. In the area of information and communications, we've all seen the beautiful redesign of the Town of Ajax website, www.ajax.ca. But with this also came several accessibility features to it. We now have the capability for Browse Aloud, Text Zoom. We're working on accessible PDF documentation as well, and we have Google Translate in over 10 different languages. Through the AAC, we're also looking to increase accessibility awareness, not only within the organization, but with the community at large. We saw participation with National Access Awareness Week activities. We participate as well with the Volunteer Recognition Awards, acknowledging accessibility within the community, as well as the Durham Region Accessibility Awards and Regional Accessibility Newsletter. In the area of employment, we have seen the implementation of workplace emergency response procedures. A staff identification form and accommodation plan template has been developed. We also participate in a co-op program with students with special needs through the Ajax Public Library, as well as the School to Work program for students with disabilities in partnership with the Ajax High School. In the area of transportation, we've seen continued provisions in the Town of Ajax taxi bylaw in terms of fare parity and to ensure that we have accommodations for persons using assistive devices. In the municipal built environment, we've seen several new changes in accessibility with our facility at the St. Francis Center, which includes an accessible lift, accessible change room, as well as accessible seating. The Memorial Outdoor Pool has an accessible ramp into the pool, accessible changing areas as well. And throughout our community centers, there have been several accessibility improvements, such as to the members' change room at the Ajax Community Center, as well as a lowered portion of the McLean Community Center counter. So now we'll go into some of the things that we can look forward to over the next 5 years. Again, this is just a summary of the forecasted initiatives and priorities. A full consolidated report is within the actual Accessibility and Action Plan. In the area of policy development, I've noted already that we're shifting from an annual reporting procedure to a 5-year planning forecast. And we're going to see continued development of policy review and documentation, such as with the attachment in the staff report regarding integrated accessibility standards for the corporation. We're going to take a look at where we are now, where do we need to be, and what do we have to do in order to get there. So this is also going to include a comprehensive staff training for all of the employees within the organization on the new integrated accessibility standard requirements, and that can be expected in 2013. In the area of customer service, we've seen consideration for accessible procurement already started this year, and that's going to continue as we progress through the plan. We'll also be looking forward to our next municipal election in 2014, which also has extensive consideration for accessibility. And we'll be continuing with our community partnerships, hoping to build on those. Within the area of information and communications, we're looking to develop corporate standards for accessible formats and documents. So all of us are on the same page and that we're providing materials in a format that's easily readable and accessible to the public. Communications is looking into a smartphone application, and we'll also be looking, I know we've just completed it, but we'll also be looking in the near future to additional website accessibility upgrades and redesign. We're going to continue with our annual recognition of National Access Awareness Week, and through the Accessibility Advisory Committee, we'll look to expand on that. Instead of just having one event, they're looking to do more throughout the year. In the area of employment, we'd like to expand on our orientation package resources. We're going to be developing and reviewing our current employee accommodation plans, and we'll be implementing Ontario Human Rights Code training as is required through the legislation. In transportation, we've already begun discussion on the percentage of on-demand accessible taxi cabs with our AAC and the public to determine that that ratio is reflective of the needs of our community. We are already also participating in accessible public transit consultation, not only with our Durham Regional Transit Specialized Services, but also with the provincial Metrolinks as well. In the area of built environment, we can look forward to several new developments within our community, including the Civic Square at Pat Bailey Square, as well as the highly anticipated opening of the Audley Recreation Center. We're also going to continue to monitor the development of the draft design of public spaces standards, as that's still kind of in limbo. So where do we go from here? In September, staff coordinated a month-long public consultation period, and October 17th, the AAC approved the final Accessibility and Action Plan. We're here today seeking approval from the General Government Committee and ultimately Council. Once that approval has been met, the plan will be posted on the Town of Ajax website and circulated throughout the region. In the spring of next year, staff will begin to engage in a review of the plan, its initiatives, and its progress in preparation of a status report that will be coming back to the committee in the fall of 2013. According to the Ministry of Finance, statistics project that by 2036, 20% of all Canadians are going to have some form of disability. So within the next 20 years to be exact, an aging population and persons with disabilities are going to represent approximately 40% of the total income of Ontario, and that equates to $536 billion. As a result, service delivery and programming will continually need to be modified to meet the changing needs of our citizens. Before I end with you this afternoon, I'd like to leave you with this final thought. We've all heard that Rome wasn't built in a day, and the same thought process can be attributed to accessibility implementation. Building a diverse, accessible, and inclusive organization is a journey, not an event. And the Town of Ajax has developed a strong foundation of accessibility planning in order to prevent and remove barriers and ensure effective change for persons with disabilities. We are eager to carry this forward with the implementation of Ajax Accessibility and Action Plan. And unfortunately, members of our committee weren't able to join us here this afternoon, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the amazing work they do. And I know Councillor Brown can also attest, as she's the council liaison to this committee. But I do want to report that the committee members are excited to be meeting with council in the new year, and they anticipate presenting a review and an update on what they've been up to through the progress of their term. So with that, I'll open the floor to any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you. Sarah started the program by saying we've come a long way, but we have. 40 years ago, there wasn't an accessible washroom in Ajax, so we've come a very long way. The committee has worked very hard, but the town employees as well have really, poured their heart and souls into this plan, and it is an action plan, and it will make Ajax successful. So I'd like to congratulate staff and Sarah in particular for all the hard work and of course the committee. And I'll move the motion.
Okay.
My phone's about to die.
Thank you very, oh, sorry.
It's in the red.
I'm voting. I was voting. He's voting.
So all in favor? Recommendations? Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, I'm glad.
So our last item, item 5.3, Ballon Girls Legacy Campaign Update. Regional Councillor Jordan or
Well,
Councillor Brown?
I'll start off, or,
Yep.
I'll start off by saying, and I know I've said before, what a success this celebration was. We were covered in the Toronto Star. I think many of you saw that the day after. I just got this today.
I didn't see that.
I know, I just saw it. So I'm passing around. It's an excellent article on DIL and the women and people that work there and the history of Ajax. It's just fantastic. So I guess my message is that it's reaching farther than the Ajax community and has been in a number of media releases and so on. So I think it's quite exciting. And the reason being is that many of these women, the two in this article, located from Saskatchewan, and they were at our event on September 28th, the celebration, but then met young men and moved up to the Scugog area because they had their families, their spouses had farms there. So it's a fascinating stories, and we're really, really pleased with the progress. Our committee really hasn't taken much of a rest. We thought we might, but we're not really able to because this project is really snowballing with people contacting us, people interested in sharing the history of their mother or grandparent who worked there and the connections with the town and so on. So that's been a real spin-off from this, and we're trying to save as much of that, but we're not really compiling it at this stage because it would require some resources to do that. But also we're planning some events in the new year, some smaller initiatives just to keep the momentum and interest going. And as well, a larger event. I can't say anything publicly right now except to tell you.
Or you have to shoot us?
Yeah. Except to tell you, save July 5th to 8th and you won't regret it. Pencil it in your calendar, and once we're at liberty to give you further details, we'll be very excited and happy to share them with you. And I'm going to pass it on. I think I've covered about all that I want to. The committee's meeting next week, as I say, to talk about further plans. But I'm going to pass it on to our treasurer, who will announce where we are to date.
Well, we have raised to date $65,000.
Oh, that's great.
Wow.
Good stuff, eh?
That's
But we
right.
still have a long way to go.
43,000 in donations and 22,000 with the celebration.
So I think
So
that
we've only received 23,000 of the 43, but some are pledged for next year. They've given an amount, but half this year and half next year. So that other 20,000 will come in next year, but so far 65,000.
That's going to be a big statue.
well,
But it has
I
to be.
think when we
It's
started
crazy.
on this, and I think we mentioned at that time that we just talked very, preliminary with communities and artists who had done statues in other communities, and the range was 250 to 500,000. So even though we've raised 65,000, which I think is really remarkable at such an early stage, that we still have a ways to go. So we're going to continue working, and we're also in the process of researching government grant opportunities as well. So our committee is very busy at that. And I mean, even today got an email from someone, I don't know how they've heard about it, but their mother worked at the plant and they want to donate. So I think it's going out. Also that there's a lot of good support from the Ontario Regiment, who is trying to get it out in a national type of publication through their connection. So I think as it keeps the news getting out, that we'll continue to be contacted by people and their families. And I mean, we still go back to the largest munitions plant in the Commonwealth. This is a big piece of the town of Ajax history, but it's also a significant piece of our national history that has never really been spoken about or talked about, and the women's role in supporting the war effort. So I think it's, I'm still excited and positive, and thanks for everybody's support and the support from our staff, who have been very helpful as well in the success so far.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Thanks for the presentation. Are there any departmental updates?
Form a double line.
Mr. Lord?
Just something very brief, just for council's information. The permits that have been issued in the past month, the Good Life building to Riocan Center beside Sobeys. So you know there's a Good Life Fitness Center going there. At the TriStar building, just south of Boston Pizza, like 36 Salem, that should be getting underway. And the TD Canada Trust building, which is going at the Nottingham Plaza on Williamson, is expected to be issued next week. So just a couple of things to watch for.
I think Mr. Hawkshaw has something.
Just wanted to report the sale of the Harwood Bailey site to Medallion is scheduled to close any day. All the papers, all the documents have been approved. We're simply waiting for the registration of a plan of survey so that Medallion can take title to the property in 5 different names to avoid the need for a severance, and also assist them with their financing arrangements. So I'm hoping that if not tomorrow, it'll close early next week.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn? So moved. Okay, all in favor? Thank you.
Of course, that wasn't going very much. I'll get back into it now, it's gonna get colder. I'm missing my spin glasses.
The girl that I like is teaching there in like a spin class.
Who's that?
I don't remember her name, but she goes at Thursday one at 7:30, which is like the
Claire?
only kind of late one.
Why, what did you usually go to?
I usually go to
Red, don't forget your
Going
phone.
tonight?
maybe. We'll see.
I might see it.
I was already there at 4:30. Charging up.
Oh my gosh, your machine.
Well, I go, it's February 1st, it's on my way home.